Welcome to the Rise Above Show with Patricia Jo Grover, where we rise above our challenges and turn believers into achievers. I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, 133 Approved Funding. They've been able to help businesses keep their doors open and people employed, but also they're there giving funding to people opening new businesses, as well as they have consumer funding for people to get funding for services like myself or Talia, my guest, provide. So if you'd like to find out more information about them, reach out to me. And until no further ado, I want to welcome Talia. And can you pronounce your last name? I want to make sure I get it right, Talia.
Dashow.
Dashow. Okay. So I want to make sure I had that right. Without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about Talia. She started her life with imposter syndrome. In her first weeks of life, she decided that she had to become someone else to be worthy of love and connection. Over the decades, she has used creativity to learn, grow, and heal. Talia's search for self-acceptance has taught her how to help other people learn to love themselves. Along the way, Talia has earned a BA in English at UC Berkeley, a certificate of as a volunteer mediator, and a certificate to facilitate Lego series play. Talia can help you quiet your inner gremlins and find your inner guidance. Oh my goodness, Talia, there are many people that need to hear from you. So I am so happy to have you with me.
Thank you so much for having me here.
You know, boy, that first statement that in your bio, that's something, that is something. So, should
I tell you about it?
Yes, please do, because with my show, you know, it's always meant to encourage, educate, and empower. But most people, again, when they hear stories of what people have been through, it helps them to relate to maybe something in their own life. So if you don't mind, we don't want to pry too much.
I'm happy to share this. I am a twin, and my brother and I were born 5 weeks preemie because there were two of us, and we were both less than 5 pounds when we were born. So the first thing that happened was we were each put into our own isolette, into a little incubator, to keep us warm and safe. And the entire intention was, safety, to protect us. But it meant that my early experience of life was that no matter how hungry, angry, scared, worried, whatever I felt, there was nobody there. I would reach out and there was just walls around me and there was nobody there. And then when my mom would do a milk run to the hospital, and I would have all the love and comfort and connection, and all related to food. So for the rest of my life, I have eaten for comfort, because clearly that's where comfort comes from, is the food. And then, but the rest, it felt like nobody would be there for me when I was struggling and scared and alone. So clearly I had to be somebody different than I actually was in order to be able to be loved and get the connection and comfort that I needed. And it took a long, long time for that to change. And it only changed incrementally over time. And it didn't help that I had really big, big feelings inside. And I thought everybody else knew that, but no one would talk about them. No one would ever talk about them. And I felt sure that meant I was a monster, and what was inside of me was horrible. And it must be really bad if no one would even talk about it. So, yeah.
Right. That is. And Talia, I have to tell you, I have a grandson who was a twin, who was a preemie, and we lost his brother after 20 days of being with us.
Ouch.
So I don't know if, how old were you when you realized all of these things?
It has been a very, very long process. And I would say I've only figured it out in the last 5 years or something.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
So for me to be aware of this, for things to look out for and everything, and his mother and everything, and I won't go in and share everything, but this our little guy has cerebral palsy. and went through so many other things. But so he's already got enough against him, but then hearing the possibilities of something, of those experiences, because that's a metaphysical type thing, when your brain is seeing and doing things that we're unaware of, in as regular, the adults looking at the situation type thing outside of. So thank you for making me aware that that's even, possible at that point, at that point of development. So
luckily now the doctors believe that skin to skin contact is better than the Isolect. So I believe that most preemies born now are getting much more of what they need than I did at the time.
Well, right. Yeah, actually you're right. You're right, because it's been more than a couple years.
Yeah.
so Talia, yeah, and again, that doesn't, I'm not trying to negate what happened, and for you, but you made that connection, and that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. So Talia, what is the connection between creativity and the imposter syndrome? Because you've figured a lot of things out, so I'm curious what you found out about that.
Yeah. Well, I've used creativity a lot along the way. It turns out this is just how I'm wired. I'm always making something. I'm always bringing creative ideas and creativity to everything that I do. So it's just part of me. And during this pandemic, I've been doing a creativity club once a week for friends. And it's been a chance to get together with some people and play some games and have some fun. Because I wasn't able to go out and connect with anybody in person because of the pandemic. So I was like, okay, let's just do this online. And it was fun and we had a great time. And I just started to realize that everybody who came to this at some point had some really similar issues around what I'm creating isn't any good. I like what everyone else is making, but I don't like what I'm making. I certainly felt that. And I've been, have dealt with imposter syndrome for decades and have learned how to move past that so much, but it still comes up. So I realize that we're all dealing with imposter syndrome. Every one of us is saying what I'm making isn't as good as what everybody else is making. Well, I don't like what I'm doing. Honestly, in my life before now, as well as during this, realizing this link between creativity and imposter syndrome, realizing that people that I trust like something that I made that I don't like opens up the possibility that I'm being a little too harsh on myself, which then opens up the possibility that I'm being too harsh on myself in other places as well. And so what I'm creating turns out it isn't crap, but it also turns out that I'm not crap. And that was a huge learning for me to be able to get there.
Oh, right. And this is some things, Talia, that people need to be hearing. So
yeah.
I applaud you in sharing, because it is for you to really share. It's not necessarily easy, and people realize that too. I think speaking out makes it important. So obviously there are many, many benefits to creativity. So can you share some?
Absolutely. Being creative on a regular basis helps our brains be more flexible. It helps us be more comfortable with ambiguity. It helps us be better problem solvers. It helps us with brainstorming and divergent thinking. All of these are great in terms of like business settings and life settings in general. But then there's also some more personal benefits. I find that when I am really in the flow and being creative, I'm really in the now. I'm not paying attention to what's going on around me. I'm not thinking about the past or the future. I'm really in the now and just allowing the creativity to flow through me. And it feels really spiritual to me. It feels like I'm connecting with something larger than me. These ideas are coming through me rather than from me. And I'm getting to create, and it's the process that matters. And what the product at the end doesn't matter nearly as much as the process of being in that creative flow.
Oh, such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing. And there it just comes to mind. It's like creativity and different arts. Different people appreciate different arts more than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some people are more talented in one thing than another, and some people have more interest in one thing than another, and thank goodness for that. Thank goodness
Yeah.
for that. Wouldn't the world be so boring if we all liked the same thing? We
Yep.
all did the same thing. We all liked to eat the same thing, drink the same thing, watch the same thing, all that stuff. So creativity and just people's individuality is so important. So important. Um, so can you give us an example of just creative games that people
Oh, yeah.
might enjoy?
So I live in California, and in California, the license plates mostly all have 3 letters in a row in them. And I've started playing this game just when I'm in the car. That I look at the 3 letters on a license plate and I try to come up with words that use those letters in that order, but not necessarily in a row.
Okay.
So TMS could be tomatoes, or could be Thomas, or there's
too much salt, right?
Sure, if you want to do it as an acronym rather than a one single word, you can do it however you want. You can't do it wrong. This is just a creativity game. So however you want to play it is fine. If I'm with somebody in the car, we will often, go back and forth, but, they'll say a word, I'll say a word, and we'll go back and forth, and, oh, that was a good one. And but just the practice of thinking about what other options might be and what other words you could come up with is part of this divergent thinking that helps you with the problem solving and helps with creativity in lots of other places as well. Being creative in one place helps open up doors to be creative in other places as well.
It does kind of overflow into, so when you start getting those creative juices flowing in, it might be in an art project, but that turns over into a work and creative process. Oh,
right.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. And, I also like to, I talk to a lot of people who think that they aren't creative. And also I talk to people who think creativity, even for people who are creative, that creativity is like a bolt of lightning and it either hits you or it doesn't. That's not my experience. In my experience, everybody is creative, although there are lots of ways that our society squashes creativity and makes people afraid to try their creativity. If you go to school and you have to, everybody draw the same snowman and it has to have 3 body parts, and if you make one with 7 body parts, they don't like it, then they humiliate you and you don't want to ever try it again. That's squashing that creativity that could then later in life you might think, I'm not creative, but actually that creativity is still there. You just don't have a lot of access to it because of all these layers of humiliation or being told you're doing it wrong, which is why I always tell people you can't do it wrong, because it's creative. But also, even when you're being creative, creativity isn't as much a stroke of lightning as it is connecting lots of dots. And the more dots you've got to connect, and the more different kinds of dots you've got to connect, the more ways you can be creative. So I find that I'm always looking on Pinterest and looking at through magazines and looking at, just trying to feed that creative interest. It doesn't mean I'm going to make any of the things that I see, but things will grab at me and, oh, that reminds me of this other thing. And, oh, I wonder if I can do this with that material instead. And it start connecting some of those dots. Right. Also, there's so many different ways of being creative. There's so many ways. Creativity is not just painting or writing or singing. It's cooking. It's how you move your body. It's how you experience birdsong in the morning. And there's just so many ways of being creative. And it's so not limited to just 1 or 2 things.
Right. And that is such a great point, Talia. And something that comes to mind, and just really thinking about that, this is a double-edged sword, okay? But and you're the specialist with this, so just kind of help me understand it, or be able to explain it better to me and the audience. Because as a woman, okay, I know that for me to allow myself to take the time to actually start a project, because I love to paint, but for me to be able to do that, I need to know, okay, I have to have this handled, this has got to be taken care of, this has got to be taken care of, for me to get into that place of that feeling of, creativity. So it's that to allow myself to get to that point. Not that it's not there. It's just to allow myself to get there. But once I'm there, like you said, I am there. I am there, baby. I am creating, and nothing else matters. So it's a double-edged sword that way for me. And I don't know if it's more so for women than it is for men, because women, and we'll go to a relationship type situation now. Women, when there's stuff going on and they're not feeling admired, respected, or cared for by their significant other, they don't want to have, it's harder for them to have relations. Okay. You know what I mean? Like that. So I don't know if that's more of a woman thing than it is men. Do you know if there's any studies or if there's differences with that for creativity levels?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know why that just came to my mind, but I know myself when I plan, like I put it in my calendar and planner to try to do something for myself. For me doing something like that is in a way self-care. But absolutely. I find that if I don't have enough stuff off of my plate and whatever, I'm not able to focus on really doing it and enjoying doing it.
I certainly think that as women, we end up with a lot more of are the dishes clean, are the kids taken care of aspects, whereas men, it seems to be a little bit easier to say, well, there may still be dishes in the sink, but I'm going to go do my thing.
Right.
And I think that women, I don't know if everybody's going to agree with me with this, but I'm willing to leave dishes in the sink in order to go be creative. I don't feel like this is a priority.
Whether you had any statistics on studies and everything. So that
I don't have. Yeah.
No. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I'm just like trying to, say, okay. But I'm not the only one. I bet I'm, viewers and listeners, I bet I'm not the only one. So
you're not the only one.
There you go.
So I'm married to somebody who is a professional artist. And I've known from the time I started dating him that if he didn't have time every day to do art, he got grumpy, and I didn't want to be with him. And I was better off letting him go off and be apart from me to do his stuff than I was to try to insist that he be with me and really not be with me while he's being with me, because he's busy thinking about what he wanted to be doing art-wise. Once he gets that out of his system and if he has a chance to do that, then he can be with me more fully. So I feel like this is something that all of us could take on a little bit more than we do, that this is self-care to spend that time. Whether you get something done in it or not, just taking the time to doodle something, just taking the time to look at some of the dots that you want to connect is spending time in that creative space and is self-care.
I 100% totally agree that is, and I do consider it self-care. So now let's kind of transition in here, because this kind of goes in there. So Talia, can you give us some tips on quieting our inner critics, because that has to do with us allowing ourselves to do things too.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of tips that I use regularly, and I would love to share them. Okay. First is that I name the gremlin voice in my head. Mine is named Cruella de Vil, but you can name it whatever you like. When I talk to other people, sometimes I hear people naming it somebody who bullied them in middle school, or there's so many different things. There's a recent Disney movie where the characters say "Silencio, Bruno," and because they're calling the voice in their head that's chattering at them Bruno. It's like quiet, Bruno. I find it's much easier to say, "Oh, that's Cruella de Vil talking. I don't really need to listen to her." But by labeling it, by naming her a separate voice, it's not my own guidance talking to me anymore. It's the fear, it's the anxiety, it's the it's not a voice that has my best interests necessarily at heart.
Yeah.
So
99.9% of the time, it doesn't have your best interests at heart.
So it's much easier to be able to identify that voice when I name it something that's not me. The next thing is that the gremlins actually are there to protect us. They're really overzealous.
Well, yes. When it is something like, well, you may not want to do that because you might get hurt because of, hey, you're going to get burned. You're going to fall off the edge of the cliff. For
sure.
Something that has real, some real true potential consequences. Yes, it's a form of self-preservation, right? And there's a difference between the self-preservation and the mind playing tricks.
Right. So one thing that I have done is ask that gremlin voice or the critic or whoever it is in your head that's talking, what it is they're trying to protect me from. And sometimes they've got some really good advice. There was one time I had tried to, I was testing out a new program, and after one of the courses, I just had this horrible twisting feeling in my stomach, like I had just failed utterly. And the voices were going crazy, like, I might as well give up right now, and there's no point in continuing, and it's just proof that I'm no good and I can't do this. And so I'm like, okay, so what are you protecting me from? What is wrong? Why are you so loud right now? What's going on? And they're like, oh, well, you were supposed to ask this and that, and you didn't ask anything. I'm like, oh, let me write that down. Those are really good questions. And it's like, what else? Oh, you should have asked this other. What else? Oh, well, you didn't explain. Okay, what else? And until they were like done. And I'm like, I have this whole list of things, questions to ask and ways to explain things differently and ways to improve the situation for the next time. And then I told these voices, hey, it's a good thing this was done on a test run and not on prime time. Oh, yeah. And my gremlins are like, oh, she's taking this seriously. Oh, she's listening to us. Oh, she's actually on top of this. Okay, I don't have to keep yelling. She's got this. I feel pretty comfortable that she's got a handle on this. And then they kind of quieted down.
Oh, what a great explanation, Talia. Oh my goodness. Viewers and listeners, I hope that you caught that, and for many of you, I'm sure it could resonate, but also that is such a great way of explaining it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So much. Now there's something interesting, Talia, that I wanted to ask you about, because with kids and, my kids are older, but grandkids, I want to know what this Lego serious play is.
Lego serious play is actually not for kids.
Really?
Really. So this is not something I made up, but it is something I went and got trained in when I found out about it, because I thought it was so cool. That the story is that people at Lego corporate said, we sell this really creative product, but our meetings are not creative. So what can we do about that? And I hired some people who are really smart and studied the brain and the hand and the brain-hand connection. And it turns out that when we use both hands to build something, we are accessing both sides of the brain. And we're actually even accessing pathways that developed when we were coming out of the trees, and the brain and the hand kind of developed at the same time. They evolved together. So there's ways that using our hands accesses parts of the brain that don't get accessed when you're talking or writing because of this connection. So then if you build a thing, and you're doing this in a group, and you have something you want to say, you can hold what you want to say in the model that you built. So you don't have to hold it in your head. So you can have more space in your head to listen to what other people are saying, because you know that what you want to say is stored in your model, and you can just look down on it to remember what it is you wanted to say. And it also gives everybody else something to look at so they can listen with their eyes while you are talking about what you built and why. So it really deepens the chance to understand each other, make connections with each other, to be able to listen deeply to each other. And so I was doing this for a lot of team building, especially when you have teams that are like two teams are merging and they each have a separate culture, to be able to build the pieces of each culture that everybody wants to keep and that was working for them, and then put all those pieces together into a shared model to figure out what the shared culture could be moving forward that will actually work for everybody. And so you get rid of a lot of the they're out to get me kinds of feelings that you get when you sort of throw people together who didn't used to work together, and you don't know them and don't know how they work.
Oh, just that concept again. When Lego, then I was like, not kids, but
not kids.
That makes sense because, oh, that's fantastic. Oh my goodness, Talia. Yeah, I can see that being such a benefit in a corporate world when you are trying to merge things, or even something so much creativity involved. Like I can see like a firm that does they try to come up with, whether it be advertising for people and all this stuff, because they get fixed in their head of what message they're trying to share and show, that they're in their heads thinking of this and how they're going to bring that in front of everybody, and they're listening to other people, but they're not really listening because they're focused on what they want to get across. So therefore it's in one ear and out the other, and they're not focusing on
it's universal
on how things can work together.
It's universal to want us to hang on to what you're going to say in your head. We all do it. And so having this way of holding what you want to say so you don't have to hold it in your head, I think is really helpful. And I've actually seen this used to do like planning for companies. We built a model of what the company looked like all the different aspects of the company, their brand and their customers and their products and all the stuff, put it all together in a model, and then built a lot of the things that affect the company around and externally. So government regulations and the suppliers and the customers and all this, all these different aspects, and then ran different scenarios through this model. Like we connected the outside things to the model of the company. And then what happens if this supplier goes out of business, and we yank it out and the model breaks, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you broke the model. It's like, well, let's break the model rather than breaking the business. If this supplier goes out of business, what's going to happen? Maybe we should have another supplier in the wings.
That's like a 3D business plan.
Right? Exactly. Right. Exactly. And what happens if this becomes incredibly popular and we bring this thing really, really close, and then it breaks because that connection was designed for that space and not for this space. And we won't have enough people to handle it if it gets really popular. So do we want to have a training program in place right now in case that happens? Just all of these different ways of thinking about what the future might hold. You just get a totally different view of things by manipulating the model.
Right. And that just brings to my mind, how every one of us as individuals learn different ways, some by seeing, some by doing, some by listening. But when you add that, the structural piece to it, you
get the kinesthetic.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Oh, yeah. I am so glad to find out about that, because it's so interesting. Wonderful. So, oh my goodness, I've learned a lot today, so that's
I'm so glad.
Cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, do you have any gifts, Talia, for our viewers and listeners?
Yes, I have on my website. It's I always get this wrong, so I just want to make sure I get this right for you. It is subscribepage.com/Talia.
Okay.
And on that page, you can find, if you sign up to stay connected, you will get a letter with 2 creativity games, including the one that I talked about earlier today, but also another one that you can play on your own. You don't need other people to be able to play these things. You can just do them on your own. Also, I would really love to invite your listeners to come to one of my creativity clubs. And because being creative in a group is a different experience than being creative alone. And you can sometimes get that feeling of, oh, other people like what I made. It's not crap after all. And you kind of need other people to be able to do that, get that experience. So, and it's also just fun. Yeah. So we're currently meeting on Thursday afternoons at 4 Pacific. So that would be 7 Eastern. And the link is also on my website. So you can find that there.
And the website, can you repeat that again?
Subscribepage.com/Talia.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me, Talia, and
my pleasure.
Everything that you've shared and brought light to. It's very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. For anybody who'd like to find out more about me, you can go to patriciajogrover.com. And I have, if you're in the continental U.S., if you text the word GOAL, GOAL, to 26786, or if you're outside the continental U.S., if you text the word GOAL to 1-866-926-4020, I have gifts for you that'll come to your inbox. And just again, thanking my sponsors, 133 Approved Funding. And I have a little video for everybody on the way out. Thanks again for being with me, and we'll see you next time.